Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Board Secretary on March 9th, 2022 in the following manner. Posted notice on the school bulletin board of the Administration Building, transmitted to the Courier Post, Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Clerk of Cherry Hill Township. And please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Mrs. Sugars, would you do roll call, please?
Mrs. Arroyo,
Here.
Mrs. Stratton, Mrs. Fleischer,
Here.
Ms. Friedel,
Here.
Mr. Meyer,
Here.
Dr. Root,
Here.
Ms. Stern,
Here.
Mrs. Tong, Mr. Avadia.
Here. All right. For our special board meeting this evening, let me start it over to Ms. Stern, because we're on the BNF agenda.
Okay, so tonight we are here to discuss the budget, and everyone has had a chance to review the budget and some of the updates. And we're just going to have Mrs. Sugars do kind of this is the finished presentation of the initial budget submission based on now in updates with state aid figures, which we received last week, which we were very happy to receive. And after that, we'll have a discussion and get a sense of where everyone's at. So I'll turn over to Mrs. Sugars for the presentation.
So we're here tonight to talk about our 22-23 budget. Our initial submission budget. There's a two-step process, as Miriam mentioned. Tonight is the first step in that process. We will be presenting information tonight. We will actually approve the budget on the meeting on the 22nd. So this is just an informational session to share budget information tonight. So we're going to talk right away about our budget breakdown here. Our budget, school district budgets, are divided into two main categories in terms of our general fund budget. First main category of our general fund budget are costs that are directly related to specific grade levels, specific classifications, specific programs. These are called distributed costs. And you can see here that we have summarized what those distributed costs are, starting with regular education, followed by special education, basic skills, extracurricular and athletics, and other instructional programs. All of these are distributed costs that are directly attributable, like I said, to a specific grade level. It includes salaries. It also includes supplies and other things of that nature that fall into this category. And so you can see here that our regular education budget, which is salaries and supplies and services that we need for the regular education programs, is increasing by just under 2 million, about 2.9%. Our special education budget, which includes salaries and services and supplies for our special education programs, is increasing about $758,000 or 3.3%. We also have our basic skills and bilingual programs, our extracurricular and athletic programs, and you can see that those are both increasing by small dollar amounts. And then we have other instructional programs, which is a small program that we run during the summer, and that's staying status quo. So overall, when we take a look at those distributed costs, our total education budget is increasing by $2.8 million, or right at 3%. If we flip over to more of our operational and student services type costs, you can see here that overall that budget is increasing about 4.6% or 3.9%, or $4.6 million, 3.9%. This is costs that are not directly attributable to various programs, but these are costs of things that support the educational program. So we have our out-of-district tuition. This is tuition that we pay to other private schools for the disabled or other districts, or our VOTEC school or our special services school district. This is tuition that we're paying out to other school districts, and you can see that we have a decrease in that area. Student services is everything from attendance, nursing services, special speech services, extraordinary services, one-to-one aids, guidance services, child study team. All those things fall into student services, and you can see overall that that is increasing 1.2 million, about 7%. Another section that we have is curriculum, media, and instruction. This is improvements to our curricular program, professional development, and our media services areas fall into this category, and that's increasing about $155,000. Then we have administration, and the state's definition of administration is the business office, business and HR office, the superintendent's office, the principal's offices, and the tech office are all the state-defined categories of administration. And you can see here that we have a decrease in that area as well. Maintenance, we also have maintenance encompasses our maintenance department, our grounds department, our custodial department, and our security department. And you can see that that's increasing $540,000. And then transportation, self-explanatory, that's all of our in-district and out-of-district, includes routes that we run every day, as well as extracurricular and athletic transportation, and that's increasing about 5.4%. And also you can see the main driver of the increase in costs in this category is our employee benefits. Overall, our employee benefits are increasing 9.6%. So overall, our support and operational areas, 4.6 million, or about 3.9% increase. Final portion of our general fund budget is Fund 12. Fund 12 is our capital outlay budget. So Fund 12 encompasses equipment, smaller projects that we do through our budget, and then larger projects that we do through the capital reserve account. We also have an assessment that we pay each year back to the state. This is a fee that we pay for previous years when the district participated in ROD grants. This is to help pay the interest on those ROD grants. We have to pay that back to the state. So you can see here that we have basically some decreases in our equipment, and equipment is anything that's over $2,000. So our larger technology equipment, some of our B&G equipment that we need, vehicles or furniture that might be over that amount. Construction would encompass smaller projects that we're doing. We'll talk about what that encompasses in a few minutes. And then capital reserve is funding that comes separately. It comes out of our capital reserve account. We have some projects that we are proposing to do for next year through the capital reserve account. And then again, the assessment that we talked about. So our capital outlay overall is about almost the same, a little bit less than it was last year. And that's a decrease of about 0.5%. So those three categories make up the total general fund budget. And as you can see, the total general fund budget is increasing by $7.4 million or about 3.3%. If we look at that from a graphical standpoint, you can see how much each of those categories makes up our budget. Regular education is the largest portion of our budget. That's about 30%. That's followed by employee benefits is the next largest at 20%. And then we have the other various categories that we just talked about. Out of district tuition is 4%, administration is 7%, maintenance and security is 6%. You can see there just the different categories that make up our total budget and how it breaks down into each category. So we talked about our capital reserve account and some of the projects that we're doing. So some of the money that we want to set aside from the capital reserve account is HVAC upgrades. HVAC upgrades are a supplement to our ESSER or ARP funds that we are receiving. We have about a little over $5 million in ESSER funds that we're using to upgrade our HVAC. This will supplement that to complete those projects that we want to do. We're focusing on getting head-in controls. We had talked about this a lot last year when we were working on the budget, head-in controls into each school. That will set us up for very well for when and if our referendum is successful. It'll start us on the path of putting controls into each of our buildings. And so, we wanted to make sure that we had good uses of those funds, use those grant funds wisely. But we're going to supplement those grant funds a little bit with some of our own capital reserve funds. The second project that we wanted to work on was an upgrade of the Barclay / Malberg Early Childhood Center. That would be an upgrade in the playground area, as well as ADA accessibility to the playground area. And again, we have some IDEA ARP funding that we'll be using to supplement this program, about $47,000 worth, to provide some ramps and things of that nature. So this would be we feel this is a good project because we can use this as a model for when we want to move on. Again, if the referendum is successful in improving some of the playgrounds at our other schools, we'll use this as a model for that. And then continuing our ADA work, we are slated to do Beck and Payne out of the 21-22 budget, and those projects will go on over the summer coming up. We're just about to put those out to bid. But this would be budgeting for work that we would do next year. And the next two schools that we would be focusing on is Stockton Elementary and Lewis / Malberg, this building here. So that would be about $1.5 million for that. So funding by our capital reserve account is just over $4 million that we would use next year to accomplish some of these projects. Then we switch over to capital outlay, which I spoke about a few minutes ago. These are smaller projects that we do actually through the general fund budget. And some of the things that we are focusing on with that are district flooring upgrades. We have no loss for classrooms and areas that need some upgrading. This includes also the removal of asbestos, which is why we do these projects over the summer in some of our buildings. And then pavilions at the middle schools. This had come out of our meetings that we had at the middle schools. We had originally put this into the bond referendum. We pulled it out of the bond referendum. This would be a project that we would move ahead with. Now, this would be right now at Carusi and Beck. Rosa, in speaking to Mr. Guy, wants to hold off and see if the referendum passes because of the addition that would be put onto the back of Rosa. So he kind of wants to see where we wind up with that before we commit to a pavilion over there. So, so right now this would be back in Carusi. And then also we had pulled all the work out for Marl Crest. Marl Crest is our operational building out on Marl Crest Road. So we had pulled all the operational, all of the Marl Crest work out of the bond referendum. They have a 1920s boiler that needs to be replaced. And since it is really our hub when we have storms and other emergencies, that building does not have a generator. We want to install a generator there as well. So those are a few projects that we would do through the capital outlay account. And so if we look at our budget a different way, if we break it down as we have done this exercise a couple times, and we just look at the same budget we just looked at, but we break it down by salaries, benefits, other, and capital reserve projects. You can see here that our salaries are increasing by 3.3, our benefits overall are 9.6, and then other, which really literally is, besides the capital reserve projects, everything else that's in the budget. So other incorporates utilities, transportation, professional development, supplies for classrooms, our insurance, a multitude of things fall into that other category. You can see that that number is going down while some of the other categories are going up. So again, overall, 7.4 million with a 3.3% increase. And if we look at that graphically, you can see here that salaries and benefits make up 73% of our budget. We are truly a personnel-driven organization. Capital reserve projects make up 2%, and quote unquote other, everything else in our budget makes up the other 25% of our budget. So just a different way to look at it to kind of give you a breakdown of where those costs fall. So we switch over to the other side and we have our revenue breakdown. How are we going to pay for all of those expenditures? You can see here that we have an increase in our tax levy, just under 2.3 million. It's actually a 1.25 on this spreadsheet. It's rounding up to 1.3, but it's actually a 1.25% increase in the tax levy. And then again, we were very pleased. Well, then we have our miscellaneous revenues. Our miscellaneous revenues don't change a whole lot year to year, and that includes things like tuition from other districts. It also includes, student activity fees that are paid, interest that we earn, some of those different kinds of things that make up that category. And that didn't change very much from last year. But what did change was our state aid. We've had another year of increases in our state aid, which we are very pleased to see. That increase this year was just under $5 million. The biggest categories where that increase was in our equalization aid and our special education aid. So we were very pleased that we saw an increase in that aid. Extraordinary aid is another category of aid that we get. It's not aid that we actually receive numbers on when we go through our budgeting process. Extraordinary aid is it's a reimbursement of costs that we pay for some of our students, either in district or out of district, where the cost per student is either over $40,000 or $55,000. We get a reimbursement from the state for those students. It's an interesting process. We don't know what our extraordinary aid is for the 21-22 school year yet, because we fill out that application in May, and we won't know what those numbers look like probably until the end of May or early June. So we tend to budget conservatively with extraordinary aid. One, because we're never sure, what that's going to look like. And number two, because it's actually something that's proposed in the current year's budget. So in the event that they did not decide to fund that one year, we don't want to rely on that too much. But we did put 2 million in. As you can see, in 2021, we received 3.1 million. So we should be very safe with the $2 million estimate for that category of aid. And then we have our federal aid. Our federal aid is semi-reimbursements that we get from the Medicare program. And then we have fund balance. Now we use a certain amount of our own fund balance, which is sort of like our own savings account. It's money that's left at the end of the year. We put a lot of that money into the capital reserve account, but we do have some left over at the end of the year. We increased that this year by 1.3 million. The capital reserve amount that we are using is just over 4 million. And then you see at the bottom there, reserve for encumbrances in the 21-22 school year. That's not actually a revenue. It is purchase orders that are brought over from the prior year that are still open. So that's really just a balancing number. It's not something you're going to see in a proposed budget. When we closed out the 2021 year, we had purchase orders that were still open that we brought into the 21-22 school year. So it's really just a balancing number because we have to make sure our revenues equal our expenditures. So again, that's the proposal of how to fund our budget for next year. And if we look at this graphically, you can see that taxes make up about 80%, miscellaneous revenues 1%, state aid 14%, our fund balance 3%, and capital reserve about 2%. Now, taxes are still a very high number, but that number has been going down, so that's a good sign. Hopefully, that will continue. So you can see there kind of how our budget is funded from a graphical standpoint. If we look at our state aid in 2021, we were originally given state aid of just about $9 million. And for those of you that were still on the board, you'll recall that there was an adjustment made to those numbers. And it was reduced, and we ended up reducing our budget in order to accommodate that cut in state aid. So we really weren't sure what to expect in 21-22, if our increase would be based off of the 19 million or the 21 million. Fortunately, we saw a large increase in 21-22 to 24.6, almost 7 million. And then again, very pleased to see our state aid increase again in the 22-23 school year. So between 21-22 and 22-23, again, just under $5 million increase in our state aid numbers. So what's new in the budget? So there are some things that we added to the budget. These are all services and personnel. First is 3 additional autistic support classes, which would be 3 teaching staff members and 9 educational assistants. So that's 12 staff members that would be added for those classes. We have an elementary math coach, a technology teacher at the high school level, a technology specialist position for the technology department, and then some additional athletic trainer services. This is not necessarily going to be a person, but more likely a company that would be hired at the height of our athletic needs, which is typically in the fall and the spring. So some educational highlights that we'll see in the budget next year. Our humanities standards will be revised grades K through 12. That will be implemented in September. Computer science standards will be implemented grades K through 8, and we'll see that also implemented in September 2022. Technology will continue to fund our technology plan between some of the grant funds that we've gotten, some of the things we've been able to do as a district. We've made great strides in the past couple of years with our technology program. We want to continue that. And then providing students literature that is reflective of the students we serve and align that with the diversity and inclusion legislation. So those are some of the education. I don't always want to talk about, buildings and furniture and things of that nature. I like to include some of the educational things that we'll see as well. So the tax impact that we're looking at with this budget, again, it's a 1.25% increase on the average assessed home, which went up slightly from last year. It's now $226,400. The annual tax impact of the increase in the budget would be $65. So also a part of our budget is the special revenue fund. Now, the special revenue fund is separate from the general fund, which we just spoke about, but it is a component of our budget that we include each year. We are required to budget at least 85% of the funding that we received the year before, because at this point, we don't know what those numbers are going to be. We don't know what Title I or Title III or IDEA will be. Now, if you look there and you look down at the CARES ESSER ARP funds number, we do have a number of 9.6 million in there. I don't anticipate that that will be new funding. I anticipate that that will be current funding that we spend. We recognize grant funds as we spend them. So we will not spend 11.3 in 21-22. We will spend, again, we're going to do $5 million worth of HVAC work next year. So a bulk of that money will get spent next year. We also, because of a change in how we handle our student activity funds and our scholarship funds, we now run those through Fund 20. That's a requirement of the state. And so we just have a balancing number in there for our student activity funds. At this point, we don't know what that number will be. So you can see there that even though you see a decrease, doesn't necessarily mean a decrease. We just budget, like I said, at 85% of what our numbers were the year before. And so that's a component of our budget. Another component of our budget is debt service, which is Fund 40. Special Revenue Fund is Fund 20. We currently don't have any debt. If the referendum is successful, we'll be talking about debt next year. But right now we became debt-free in 2018. And so we don't have any debt service that's part of our budget. So let's talk about what happens now. So we're reviewing the budget this evening. There will be a resolution on the agenda for March 22nd for the board to approve. The board approves the tax levy to support the general fund budget. That's the board's role in approving the budget. So it's just the tax levy to support the general fund budget. Once that's done, we have a very large software program that we work with the state. We input all of the information into that. That gets submitted to the county office for their review. They review it, they ask questions, they look at our documentation. Once they review it and they're satisfied, they give us permission to hold our public hearing. We hold our public hearing at the end of April. Right now, our public hearing is scheduled for April 26th. Now, years ago, this used to lead into a vote on the budget. We no longer vote on the budget. So once we get through the public hearing process, the budget is approved and we can move ahead with our budget at that point. And a lot of times we do move ahead. We start to order things and set things up and get things going for the next year, especially in the environment that we're in right now, where there's a lot of delays in receiving things. So that's what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. As you know, this process is delayed this year because of the delay in the governor's message. We actually had originally been slated to approve our budget March 8th. And so we're just a couple of weeks behind what we normally would be. All right. Questions?
So thank you, Mrs. Sugars, for a great presentation. And let's go head over to Mrs. Friedel.
Ms. Sugars, just a couple of questions.
Mhm.
The the LPA SDA assessment,
Mhm.
is that forever? Or is there an end date that we are caught up and paid up on prior ROD grants?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure about that. I just know it shows up every year. So as far for the foreseeable future, I believe we'll be paying that assessment.
Okay. I want to just touch for a minute about the pavilions
Mhm.
at ROSA, and I want to make sure I'm speaking so people can hear me. Are the structures going to be permanent structures?
They are.
Okay, because if they weren't, I was just wondering if there was a way to do the structures so that the ROSA students have them as well, if they could be moved, if the referendum, but that is the answer, they are permanent.
They are permanent. They have
Okay.
footings, they have concrete, they have roofs.
Okay.
Yes.
And then just a comment with the playground at Malberg / Barclay. With the grant writer, there is a company that does ongoing grants for playgrounds called Kaboom.
Mhm.
So that might be something that we might be able to leverage some more outside funding for.
I will make sure I mention that to them.
Thank you. And I just while I have the microphone, I just want to thank the community as well for all of their tweets and messages to the state for fair funding. So it was a true team effort, and I appreciate everybody here and out in the community who has helped.
Okay, other questions from board members, comments? Anything you want to understand a little further, or any thoughts you're having? Mr. Mayor.
The updated medical benefits or
Mhm.
overall benefits, I assume, but I don't want to do that. So just looking for you to clarify. Does that include the proposed
Horizon increase, the reduced increase of 17%, that's factored in to that figure as well.
It is. And, health benefits is more than just medical benefits, right? It includes other kinds of benefits. It includes health benefit waivers that we pay to employees. It includes tuition reimbursement. It includes Social Security. It includes pension payment. So that category encompasses a lot of different factors. But yes, it does include the 17%.
And then also just to add to what Ms. Friedel said, having been participating and watching the fair funding efforts really from the other side of this table for much longer, it was great to see that the state responded and that things are moving in the right direction. We're not completely there yet, and hopefully we'll get there, but I do recognize the amount of work and effort that many people put into getting the state to help us get back on track. And that should not go unnoticed. It's not any one group. It's not this board. It's not simply the Fair Funding Committee, although they certainly were amazing in organizing so much. It's also the community at large, and everybody did a great job and should be proud of what they did for the students in the district.
Absolutely.
Other questions, comments? Mrs. Fleischer.
Thank you. I did have a quick question, or maybe something that you can give more clarification. With the transportation cost increases, I know that's something that we're always working for or working against, especially now. Do you actually have the numbers coming in? I know because when we were talking about school start times, you had talked about the way that the work and the scheduling that we have to do, that it has to be done so far in advance. So do you have a better handle? I know we have to estimate a lot, especially with, figuring out our drivers and the bus companies and if they're even going to be surviving. Do you have any numbers or?
So what happens this time of year is we find out whether or not our current contractors want to renew the contracts that they have with us currently. And that's based on the state CPI. The state CPI is 1.9%. And a lot of our contractors felt that given some of the challenges that they have, that they could not renew at that. So of our 364 routes, we had 117 contractors say that they could not renew the routes. I was actually pleasantly surprised that it wasn't worse than that. So those routes will be put out to bid. So we don't have numbers on that yet, but they will be put out to bid in the coming weeks so that we can, find out what those numbers are going to be. I think we budgeted adequately. I think we have enough in there to make sure that we meet the needs that we need to meet.
Thank you. And thanks for explaining the whole scheduling of everything. And I do also want to echo Mrs. Friedel and Mr. Mayor about the community's amazing support for getting us our state aid and for our legislators for listening. And it's been a long road and hopefully it will keep going. Like we said, thank you for everyone.
Mr. Avadia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sugars, for this presentation. Very thorough. Great to see this. The two questions I have is, so in 2020, 2021, there was an original number and then a follow-up number.
For the state aid.
For the state aid.
Yes.
If we were to get a follow-up number this year, what does the timing look like on that?
I'm not anticipating that. We were warned that was coming in that particular year, that there were going to be changes, and that change actually took place over the summer. But we had anticipated it. So we had our list of cuts ready to go because we knew it was coming. I'm not anticipating that we would have any kind of issue with that. But if we did need to make cuts, typically we look at operational areas first. We look at our buildings and grounds department. We look at our technology department. We look at things like professional development. We would look at things that have been added to the budget about whether or not we would continue to add them, and we would do what we could to try to stay away from positions. But depending on the size of the cut, at some point, we would have to look at positions. As you can see, it's 73% of our budget. So
Right.
positions could potentially be impacted depending upon the size of the cut.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, in what's coming out of the capital reserve account, I think from our bond discussions, these are things that would not, are the three buckets that you've identified areas that would not be eligible for a large reimbursement from the state?
Well, with the ESSER funds, I think waiting, if we're going to use ESSER funds to do the HVAC, waiting to see if the bond referendum passes to supplement those funds, I think would be impractical. I don't think the timing would work for that piece of it. The playground, yes, if we kept the playground in, or we decided to do that through the referendum, yes, the playground would be something that would be considered reimbursable. The ADA work is just a commitment that we've made. Anything that we do now, even though it may not get the reimbursement, it does take pressure off the referendum in terms of the projects that we're doing. So even though, we're not waiting for the funding, I do think that in the end, it does benefit us to try to keep moving ahead with some of these projects. The bond referendum doesn't pass, we'd be even further behind, in some of those areas.
Okay, so let me ask a more targeted question then. For the playground side of it, is there something we could choose that has benefit of the same basic dollar figure that would not be reimbursable with a state percentage?
We certainly could look at other projects. There's no lack of projects in the district. I think our feeling was that because we have some funding from the IDEA preschool funds, we wanted to use that to supplement this project. Those funds, I want to say, have to be spent by the end of 2023. I think it's 2023. So taking advantage of that funding, the project is not just the playground. It would also address some path walkways at the end of the main hallway there. It would address the fact that there's steps there. We would change those steps out so that it would increase ADA accessibility to that building. There's a variety of things that project would address. I think it would also give us an idea, as I mentioned, looking at the equipment that's available, working with the contractors to see what would work if we pass our bond referendum and we're moving forward with doing playgrounds at all the schools. Gives us a chance to take a look at some of those products and some of those kinds of things in preparation for that. I would say that if we were trying to look for something that wasn't funded by the state, again, work at Marl Crest would not be funded by the state. We could continue some of that work. But I think there would be a lot of advantages to proceeding with that project.
Okay. No, yeah, you definitely make a good case for it, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Other questions or concerns? Dr. Rude?
I don't really have a question or concern. I just want to say that the budget overall looks very reasonable. There's so many working parts, so many things that we can't quite predict in the current chaotic atmosphere out in the world. So thank you for both presenting it so clearly to us, and I think it looks like you've done a really excellent job in really looking to all of the different aspects that you have to. So well done.
Thank you. It's not just me, it's a team for sure. My staff, Mrs. Adrian's staff, it's a big team that puts it together.
Okay, well, I didn't know. I have a couple of questions. I don't know, Mrs. Arroyo, I don't know if you had anything. Okay. Just could you give us the dollar figure for the shade structures, the Marl Crest work, and the flooring updates? I don't know if I saw a dollar figure on that, so I apologize. I missed it, but.
Dollar figure for the.
Were those included in just overall capital reserves? Is that why? The shade structures and.
We're not doing any shade structures out of the budget. We would do pavilions, which would be a more permanent structure. Those right now are estimated to be about $150,000 a piece.
Okay. Okay.
And the Marl Crest work.
I guess the whole body of work, that one slide, I just didn't know if there was.
So that, most of that would be coming out of what we had talked about, the capital outlay portion of the
Okay.
budget.
Got it.
Again, that would be district flooring upgrades, which makes up some of that, pavilions at the middle school, and then the HVAC and generator work. I don't have those exact numbers, but I can send them home.
Yeah, that's okay. It was the one that I didn't recall, like what the actual number was. So, and just to clarify, I think you said this, you shared this information with us. I think that 2 years ago, I guess, going into, an unexpected, a year that we didn't know what was coming, we had like a 3.7% tax levy that year, right? So this is, really a lot lower than that. And I think, it seems we've been really heard by the governor, which is wonderful experience to be. So I can't, echo enough the appreciation. We had a great presentation from Fair Funding from Lori Deitch last week from Fair Funding Zone PTA, and all the effort of the community. I just have to agree with everyone who has said that, having dealt with fair funding and been involved for several years, it's absolutely made, in no question in my mind, made a big difference in why we got, a budget where we needed to get to. So I just want to appreciate that. And also I want to thank you too and your team. This is an enormous task. When you told us what the things like what we're looking at with the health insurance increases, and I was like, I don't know how in the world we're going to get to, it's an increase in a budget, but it's a very modest increase overall. And I couldn't see how that was going to happen. So I'm relieved, I guess is what I would say, at a time when inflation is so high. I think the national average is 4.5%. I think it's higher in New Jersey. This is pretty amazing. So just thank you. Okay, I think if we're finished with our questions from the board, then I think we're just going to kind of move on to getting a sense of, the thoughts about this budget and the proposed piece that we get to weigh in on, which is the tax levy, which is at this point, the proposal from for the district is a 1.25% tax levy. So I don't know if we want to just kind of maybe go around, or if anyone wants to start. Just to kind of weigh in on your thoughts. This is not a vote. It's just to share your thoughts, and if you'd like at this point. I hate to put the new folks on the spot, but we have a lot of new folks this year. So Dr. Root, thank you for volunteering.
Sure, I'll comment. I think obviously as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay any more taxes, but I think that our administrators have done an amazing job of putting together a good budget, and I think that a 1.25% increase is very modest. It's below the 2% allowed, and I definitely think that they work really hard to get there for everybody. This isn't the tax rate. I'm appreciative of the fair funding. I hope that people out there will keep up that fight, because in looking at a lot of the numbers out there in different state aid things, Cherry Hill is still way below kind of the average there. And so awesome job. We've gotten a great increase. Keep fighting. The more state aid we can bring in, the less it'll impact our property taxes, and the less we really have to struggle with that. But as for what we have to do right now, I think that we've been brought a pretty reasonable suggestion.
Thank you, Dr. Rood. Mr. Avadia. I guess we're going whoever volunteers. No, go for it.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Root's points are well said, and I concur. It's all, there are definitely a lot of moving pieces, and Ms. Sugars and her team work very hard. As we found out last meeting, they do it very well as well. But I guess for me, the only other thing is, in this education industry, it's one of those things. There are seismic things happening on a national scale. For us to be competitive, we've got to make the investment. So wonderful news out of Cherry Hill Fair Funding. They worked very hard, and they've worked very hard for many, many years. And we're getting good results. But, with where we need to be competitive, with where we need to be with coming inflation, and just knowing things that are happening in education, these are investments that we're entrusted to make. And I think we're on a good path to do it. So thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Fleischer?
Thank you. I do have to agree with Dr. Rude and Mr. Vadia. And thank you again, Mrs. Sugars, for your team's amazing work. The fact that we're able to keep it at 1.25, and it does seem like it's pretty tight, especially like what you had said, Mrs. Stern, with the inflation rate being so much higher and so many different aspects sort of working against us, but to also look at the fact that keeping it so low, but being able to add programs, being able to add the 3 additional autistic support classes plus staff and the math coaches and the technology positions. So we're keeping it under the 2 and being able to keep it reasonable, but still adding new programs and adding, a lot of new experiences for our kids and more support. So it's not that we're keeping it so tight and just getting by. So we continue, even with this, to be able to fully expand, what our district is doing. So thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor?
So just to put a slightly different twist on that, the way I see this overall, as we're able, thanks to the work, Ms. Sugars, of your entire team, to actually do more and provide more for the kids in the district with just a little bit more, right? We're not in a position, unfortunately, that we can necessarily avoid any additional tax levy. That was always really an unrealistic hope. It would have been nice, but given where the country is, given inflation, given so many costs, especially over just the last couple of months, as we see how things are spiraling, slightly out of control. That's not happened here. These numbers are quite reasonable. And at the same time, as Ms. Fleischer pointed out, we're still able to do some more. We're still able to add some important staff. The numbers may not look huge, they're not a lot, but they are what we ask for. They're what our students really need to continue to compete and to excel. And so I think that's something to be proud of, that with regard to where we could be and where so many other districts may be, this budget is really impressive in that regard. And again, I really commend the work that went into it. And to Mr. Rude's or Dr. Rude's point, continued work towards more advances with fair funding, and the state started to meet us, not quite halfway, but it's, the game's not over, and it's finally moving in the right direction. So I'm happy for all that.
Mrs. Arroyo?
I'm comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Friedel?
I'm very comfortable with the increase. Ms. Sugars, I've worked with you for a few years. So I will make the assumption, but I'll ask, because I know you are very conservative in your numbers. So in this increase, you have taken into account the instability and prices and gas and things. I had no doubt, but I just wanted to say it out loud. So again, like everybody said, no increase would be lovely for your pocketbook, but I think this is a really reasonable, sensible budget. So thank you for your and your team's work.
Okay, I'll just give my few cents as well. No pun intended, I guess, into the budget talks. I think what I always think about with any, tax levy is, what is the impact to the people in our community, and especially the people where, any tax increase, any increase is tough. And, we have to think about that for every family in this district. I do think, a $65 in a single year is a manageable tax increase. And, I think a lot about what we've been hearing in our facilities meetings this year. In the past 6 months, again and again and again, everyone just saying, I moved here for the schools. I worked, really hard to make sure I could move here, whether, purchasing a home or renting a home or an apartment. I wanted the education that comes in with Cherry Hill. And that education is the education it is because we make sure that we protect our quality. And we do that by keeping great staff, and making sure that our positions stay competitive. And I think it's really impressive that we can do a 1.25% tax levy, and meet all of our obligations that we've committed to with our staff for benefits and salary. I think, I've also heard a lot of community members talk about frustrations that we haven't kept up with our buildings. And we've moved in the past several years in a different direction to start to really prioritize taking care of our buildings, keep the commitment to ADA work, which I would absolutely want to see us stick with in our capital improvements. And we're also in this budget working towards our district goals, which is to address some of the math challenges that our students are facing and increasing our STEM offerings. I mean, that to me is exactly on point. It's modernizing our curriculum in a gradual and important way. So, I just think it checks all the boxes in a very reasonable way. I think it's very fiscally responsible. I think, this district has heard loud and clear, we need to sometimes prioritize being stewards of our buildings, and we're doing so without sacrificing the education in any way here. So I'm definitely in favor of this, not with a light heart, not, thinking about what else, we're prioritizing down the road, but I'm in favor of this. And I think that it's nice to see such a huge state aid increase, and I am grateful for it. I also want to say it's the number we were supposed to have 15 years ago. This is the budget we were supposed to get from the state 15 years ago. So I keep that in mind in terms of how we're trying to still kind of recover from that. So long-winded, but no surprise there. So thank you. I'm definitely in support of where we're at. So thank you so much. Okay, turn it over to Mr. Avadia.
Thank you, Ms. Stern. All right, so moving on to the public comment. I'll say what I say, which is that Cherry Hill is a community that values education, and educational topics often bring out passionate response. The Cherry Hill Board of Education supports a school climate in which our diversity is a source of strength and all are included. Respect is foundational in how we treat you, how we treat each other, and how we support our administration and staff in their essential work. Please join us in practicing the utmost respect for all. And with that, I will look to the room. And then I will look online. Okay. Ilana Yaris, you are first.
Alana Yaris, Cherry Hill. I noticed in the budget that you'll be using the Barclay Early Childhood Center playground as a model for future playgrounds that are renovated. This was done with the vestibule as well. However, there were items discovered to be missing or needing to be altered when vestibules were put in at other schools, such as Thomas Paine, having a shade structure, pavilion type to protect those outside during bad weather. Will Barclay ever have this added in for their vestibule? If the Barclay playground is the model, what if there are needs discovered after the fact and then altered and fixed for other schools? Will those issues be addressed at Barclay's playground, or once it's in, that's it? Second, I wanted to comment on a shelter in place that occurred at Kilmer earlier this week. It seems at dismissal time. So some of my kids who stay after school were a part of it, and some of my kids who come straight home after school were not a part of it. My children who stayed after school were told by some of the teachers that the reason there was a shelter in place was because there was a moose let into the school. Now, although I am a believer of the philosophy that whatever children say happens at school you shouldn't always believe, and whatever a child says happens at home, a teacher won't believe necessarily everything. Of course, there are circumstances where things need to be taken seriously. I, as a parent, am a little disconcerted that 2 of my children from 2 different adults in the building were told something such as a moose was in the building and that's why they had a shelter in place. I don't know if that was code or if that was just a joke, but it was a little disconcerting to hear that my children were lied to. Maybe lied is too strong of a word, but maybe joked to, when children in elementary school do not understand sarcasm or joking in that way, especially children who are special education students, and they absolutely would not understand that it was a joke. So I just, in the future, I would prefer, I understand that staff like to joke with students, but if in the future they could think about the jokes that they are making and what they're saying, because as a parent in the district, and I'll be here for a long time, it was a little disconcerting to hear that a moose was in the building, even though that was not actually the case. Thank you.
Thank you. We will give it one more moment. Yonatan Yaris, you are next.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to the board. This is probably one of the most engaging budget conversations in the last couple of years. It was awesome. And to Ms. Sugars and her team, I agree 100% with all the comments around the table. We're very fortunate to have Ms. Sugars and her team working on behalf of our community. I also wanted to encourage the board members to get together to work on coming out to Trenton. As a longtime veteran of testifying before Trenton, the battle is never really over. That yes, we got what we wanted so far in the proposal, but I have learned from the past that as easy as things are given, it is easily taken away. That keep showing up, and to express the appreciation to the budget committees and to be at every possible budget hearing that goes on, be it remotely or in person, and to keep that up throughout the year is really important to build those relationships so that we don't make the mistakes that happened 15 years ago and longer ago, that we seem to have turned a corner in terms of our legislative engagement. But it really is an entire process, and I hope the board will be able to come together in collaboration with the administration to appear at these testimonies to remind the legislators of what it's like. And as Ms. Stern mentioned, it's 15 years ago, this should have been our budget. Yes, it's great right now, but imagine if these cuts hadn't taken place, what else could have been happening and where we could be. So please keep up the pressure. That the community does a great job, but as our elected leaders, the ball is also in your court to keep on the pressure. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll give it another 2 seconds. And then we'll say that public comment for the evening is over. Thank you. Oh, now oops, no, let's not do that. Okay, a couple pieces of board business before I let Dr. Melange delight us with updates that many people wait for in the community and are at the edge of their seat on. So I don't want to, far be it for me to take up too much time. However, in a week, we'll be back here. So this is a special month where we get to meet every week. You're welcome. The week after that, Mrs. Arroyo will lead us in a town hall where we'll be talking about school start times. The people participating in that are Mr. Mayor, Dr. Rude, Mr. Ovadia, but it will be Mrs. Arroyo's show. The second piece is join us for a riveting CNI retreat on June 29th. It will be a lot of fun. It will be, though, most importantly, educational, and I hope that many people will tune in. And with that, I will, gentleman to my right, to take us away with Superintendent Comments.
Thank you, Mr. Ovadia. And thank you, as everybody else said, to Mrs. Sugars, the full team. And those of you that are online typically can't see all of the other administrators that are in the room that are sitting now tonight over by the wall. The building of a budget begins in Cherry Hill and in most school districts, but for sure here in Cherry Hill, late in September and early October. So this is a months-long process that there are many hands and many individuals, from the building principals and staff members and secretaries who are involved, to each one of the assistant superintendents, to Ms. Mallory as the Director of Special Ed. Lots of different pieces that go into it. Mrs. Sugars and Ms. Vitansky in the Finance and Business Office do a tremendous job because they have to go through every last dollar that's being proposed and it goes into what's taking place. So certainly quite a labor to get to where we are tonight. Mr. Vadi, I think, mentioned earlier, this evening, based on the audit that we received that Mr. Holt presented last week, we've, have had reasonable budgets and we've done a great job in terms of how the money's been spent and the accountability for those funds. In terms of the comments tonight, I'm not aware of a moose over at Kilmer. I am aware of a shelter in place that took place at Kilmer because of a medical emergency that took place with one of the children. I will have Mr. Slavin reach out to you, Ms. Yaris, directly so you can have a conversation about what that was. And you can give him additional details about what took place. Thank you, Mr. Avadi, for talking about the meeting next week and for the town hall meeting. The town hall meeting will take place here at the administration building. It will be hybrid. We'll be broadcasting via Zoom. We'll also be in person. So people will have access either in person or online to be a part of that. Also excited because, as you can see, we are back in the boardroom. This is the first time that we've had a full meeting in the boardroom in 25 months. So it was February of 2020 since we held our last regular board meeting with board members in person, public in person, the administrative team in person in this room. Since that time, as you recall, we started back in-person meetings in August of 2021 at Crucy Middle School. In September, we moved to High School West. We shifted from one auditorium to the other auditorium at High School West and then returned here to the administration building in January and then shifted back down here to the boardroom for this evening. In all of those moves, again, special thank you to Don Bart, our Director of Operations, to Mark Levinsky and Marcus Holman from the Technology Department. They have been the constants no matter where the meetings have taken place from when they were online fully beginning in March of 2020 until, again, here tonight. They've been the constants in making sure that everything is up and running from sound to lights to the video production. So thank you for all that and thank you for the time.
Thank you. And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Ms. Stern and everyone in favor say aye. 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 Okay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.